keep an eye on that, just as we're keeping an eye on inflation. A quick look at the 10-year note, which is a sort of a convenient gauge if the markets are getting concerned about that. Well under 1.5%, despite the uptick in oil prices. Now oil over $73 a barrel. But interest rates are holding steady right now, even with that run-up. What does Art Laffer make of that? The former Reagan economist, of course, an advisor to Donald Trump, many others. Big fan of Bill Clinton. So he's a bipartisan, sort of a small government guy and a big tax cut guy. So, Art, great to see you. Are you worried about
Good to see
inflation?
you, Neil. No, not really. I'm not. I don't see any of the indicators at present, Neil, that tell me that inflation is coming back in any type of major way. Gold prices are not soaring or rising. The 10-year bond yield, as you mentioned, is below 1.5%. If you look at the dollar and the foreign exchanges, it's mildly strong. So all of the macroeconomic indicators tell me that there's really not an inflation problem. Now, we have seen a lot of the spot commodity prices and all those rise, but as Chairman Powell said, I think yesterday, this is a one-time blip, and it looks like it's going to be over fairly soon. That's what I would guess it to be. Now, inflation is not something to poo-poo. It's something very serious. If it were to come in, it would be dangerous.
You know what? You're right to say the focus on inflation right now might be a bit overdone here, because I think a fairer representation is to compare prices to pre-COVID levels. Not during COVID, of course.
That's correct.
Everything virtually stopped. So obviously, if you're going to look at that, you're going to see a noticeable uptick in activity and the prices that go with it. I get that. But do you think the Fed, when it talks about this being transitory, is thinking in terms of months or a year?
I think they are talking about months, not a year. I mean, if it's a year, it's really a long period before this bubble goes through the system. So they have to be talking in terms of months. And some of the numbers, Neil, do raise an alarm. I mean, when wages go up, it's really hard to imagine wages falling back down again. Some of these other products as well, housing prices really are loath to ever drop. So the very sharp rise in housing prices, I think, is much more emblematic of a problem here. Wages and housing prices don't tend to be just cyclical and pop up and down. They tend to be permanent once they take a new hold.
And usually they start, at least the big inflationary scares we've had in this country in the 70s, the early 70s with the oil embargo, when Richard Nixon was president, late 70s when it extended way beyond the oil embargo when Jimmy Carter was president. But they did start with oil. This seemed to start with oil as well. But you think it ends there?
Well, I do. I mean, if you look at the 70s, the real price increase was in gold. Gold went from $35 an ounce to $900 an ounce. There's nothing even close to that in the scenario here. Now, gold and oil prices in the 70s were linked very closely, if you'll remember. I mean, we had a very sharp surge in oil prices and in gold prices, but that's just not happening today. I mean, we do have a rise in oil prices, that's true, and gold is not at its lowest ever, but there is nothing like the 70s in these numbers that I'm seeing. Nothing.
So obviously that would give the Federal Reserve some breathing room. We do know exactly how Paul Volcker under Jimmy Carter tried to deal with this inflationary threat. He would raise interest rates rather dramatically, 1 full point at a time. Do you think we would ever have to see something like that?
Well, just remember, I mean, when we took office on January 20th, 1981, the prime interest rate in the United States was 21.5%. That was the prime. Mortgage rates were double digit. So a very, very different world than we had back then. Paul Volcker was a hero beyond a heroes. What he did to bring inflation back under control and be a partner of Ronald Reagan to create the greatest prosperity ever was amazing. We aren't anywhere near that with regard to prices or inflation, but we do have real fiscal problems today, Neil, just as we had with the end of Jimmy Carter, and those fiscal policies are not being addressed correctly. Raising taxes is not the answer. That's not what Reagan did, and that surely is not the right thing to do now. We just shouldn't be raising taxes.
Now, you knew Ronald Reagan so well, and he thought so highly of you, but we hear in a lot of these documentaries since how in his final days in office, he regretted the building deficits here, and the fact that he couldn't get that spending under control. The more money came into Washington, a ton of it did, the more they spent, and both parties were guilty of that, of course. But it was a big lament for him. What did you think?
Well, you know, at the end of the Reagan era, if we didn't have spending under control with Ronald Reagan, if he was upset then, just imagine how upset he would be
You're right, you're right.
with these proposed spending. I mean, you know, it's just crazy. And general principles don't go away with time. This spending stuff is really bad. It's going to hurt the growth of the United States. It's not the right thing to do. It may not be as bad as some people say it is, but it's really the wrong way to create prosperity and growth. It really is.
No offense to your, friend and Donald Trump, but there was a lot of spending going on then too, even pre-pandemic. So
yes, there was.
Both parties are not immune. Both parties are not immune to this, are they?
No, they are not. And the Republicans were just as bad back then at spending as any of the Democrats.
No, you're right.
And, I think the one mistake was Trump was that $3 trillion spending package. But other than that, I think Trump did a great job. Transparency, Operation Warp Speed. I mean, all of these were phenomenal that Trump did. But I did not agree with the spending program.
You've always been a straight shooter, Art. I always appreciate that. Art Laffer, the former Reagan economist, Svengali to one American president after another.